YouTube, Dawson Ryder here. Welcome to my review for Power Rangers Dino Fury episodes 12 through 22. This review is meant for the people that are just now watching them now that they've dropped on Netflix on October 15th. I've covered each episode individually with the international airings, so if you're interested in hearing my detailed thoughts on every single episode, check out the playlist. You know, I go episode by episode and you can hear my thoughts on all the positive and negatives of each. This one's going to kind of be just an overview, kind of talking about my feelings on the episodes as a whole. Kind of, you know, going over the progression of them and whatnot, you know, how they flowed together, how it was as a second half. I'm going to kind of go in order in terms of how the plot was and bring up likes and dislikes, but I'm not going to go into the minutiae of little details. That was kind of for the episodes. And then, I'll mention this again at the end, but I am going to be doing an overall season review here in the coming weeks. So we basically come back with a couple of filler episodes, which was Super Hot Shot, which gives me more reason to call Javi Chase, and then the Matchmaker one, I believe it was. And I think the thing I like best about those is I do like that those tied together as far as character story, because you had the first one with Izzy, seeing Fern again, who was from the running episode, which I always forget about that episode for some reason, except for now, obviously, but I like that they tied that back even if I didn't remember it at the time, and then it ties into the next episode with Matchmaker, and I appreciate little continuity details like that, when you have reoccurring characters or reoccurring character storylines for the Rangers. I feel like those are few and far between in recent years, so I did appreciate that. I liked the stuff with Izzy and Fern. The stuff with Izzy and her gym class thing was a little stupid in terms of I wish that the coach lady would have been less obvious about being a scammer. She's basically wearing a shirt saying, "I am a scammer." Like, if you're going to be a grifter, you got to be better at it. That's pretty much the lesson to take away from that, kids. I'm just kidding. But that was a little bit on the nose, but I did like that a little bit for her character. And they were two, I think, mostly decent episodes, but they were a little bit more fillery to sort of start with coming back on there. Not that there wasn't some other little details and stuff going on, like we got Void Knight's identity and stuff like that, which is something I appreciate in a lot of Dino Fury episodes. Even when it's more of a filler one, you might get a little nugget of the overall picture, which I appreciate. But they were a little bit more, you know, lackluster, getting things going. And then we get into one of the bigger episodes, which was Old Foes, which was the Halloween clip show special, but also the return of Lord Zedd, which I've talked about a lot. Done a lot of Lord Zedd theory videos. What I'll say is I have mixed thoughts on it. I think Zedd looks really great. I know that it's still confusing people the way he's back, even though they explained it, and I've done like a million videos explaining it. I know it's a little bit weird, but it's not that hard to wrap your head around. The voice, I think, leaves a lot to be desired. My headcanon is just because it's the evil in him being resurrected. Since he's not a whole person anymore, that's just what his voice sounds like. So he feels a little generic. I'm worried about it being too fan-servicey, but I'll admit I'm intrigued by the fact that he's in the wind, and a lot of people are speculating he might be one of the big villains of Season 2. Like, there's a chance he could be. He could be either one of the big villains, or he could be the big villain, or he could just be a one-off. He could appear for a one- or two-parter, but I didn't expect him to be still in the wind. I thought he was honestly going to be like a mirage at first, and then I'm like, okay, it'll just be a one-off. But so that was surprisingly interesting. You know, it's a little bit weird having it a part of the clip show. I still wish the clip show stuff didn't have to be a part of the DNA of it. Then we get into the Gold Ranger stuff, which I think is mostly positive. I thought there was a really good build-up to him. Like, the first episode was all build-up to it. Like, the foreshadowing with the lake stuff and pulling it out and then, hey-oh. But, you know, pulling the tube out of the lake. This is just getting weirder. Ending on the end fight, but it didn't try to cram his introduction into that one episode. It was kind of like a teaser. Like, we built up to his introduction. We kind of got to look at him like, who's this mysterious Gold Ranger? Obviously, we knew who he was. But then we get to know him in the next episode. As I mentioned in my reviews for that, I really thought the conflict between him and Zeta was interesting, and we got those huge reveals about Rafcon's backstory, about how they were the ones that created the sporks, which is endlessly fascinating. I thought that was really cool. I love to get stuff like that. I thought the dynamic between them was interesting because of that. I think it's a shame that apparently there's a mandate that Rangers can't have a conflict for more than one episode because it's unrangerly, because Rangers aren't actual human beings. They're just mannequins that are brought to life from 1993. But I thought that was interesting. I wish that would have gone longer. Like, the idea of Ion being leader was interesting. You know, that could have been interesting change from the show in general, but I thought, I've said this in both times I mentioned it in the spoiler video and the individual review, I thought it would have been interesting to have them be kind of like co-leaders, because the thing that tripped Ion up was like the big picture stuff, it seemed. But he was actually not so bad at the on-the-ground stuff, even if they kind of made Zato incompetent at the on-the-ground stuff for just one hot minute to prove their point. But that could have been interesting, kind of having a leader and co-leader, where Zato kind of handles the bigger picture stuff, but maybe Ion's the organizer. I think I saw someone bringing that up about how that they felt that was the way Time Force worked, where Jen was kind of like the big picture leader, but Wes was like the field commander. And I thought that could have been interesting. But regardless, I set up an interesting precedent. And I also really like Ion as a character. I like him a lot. I think he's really slick, he's really cool, he's really fun. It bothers me slightly that his fish out of water humor, being that he's in the same situation as Zato, that he seems to know more about Earth culture, but I'm just going to assume he's quicker on the uptake. It just is sometimes a little jarring for him to know things about insurance, but he's got some good lines, and I just find him to be really likable, and he fit in really easily with the rest of the cast for me, and also added something new. And he had some really good lines, like when they fought the monster that couldn't be hit by energy because it was absorbed, he's like, relax, this attack hits different. It was a good one. I wasn't a fan of some of the stuff in the episode about him taking ice cream as a bribe for being a ranger, because it got into some goody two-shoes territory there. Just kind of a little bit of an old lesson, and it rubbed me the wrong way in certain ways, so that bothered me a little bit. And there's also weird stuff going on with the seasons. This is random to bring in, but that episode with the ice cream reminded me that he's like, oh, I love summertime, even though we had Halloween 15 minutes ago. And then in the finale, they were like, it's almost summer. I'm like, what kind of purgatory are you guys living in? Where's Cass? Where's Benny? I also felt there was a lot of like plot conveniences going on, like when we get into the Wired episode where it was about Izzy pretending she was good at electronics for her electronics class, and they kept calling it Alectronics, and that got her in trouble, and then she had to learn how to use stuff from Preston. Oh my god, I really just called him Preston. What's his name? Fake Preston. The guy that's been a jerk the whole season. Oh, Ollie. There we go. That was another thing. Total sidetrack. Ollie came off like a jerk in a lot of the season. He's always been very pompous, and I'm never a fan of those only science characters, especially in a show or a world. And this isn't just pertain to this show, but it pertains to many shows I've watched or movies where a character lives in a world where it's like established that like ghosts and crazy stuff exist, and they're like, oh no, it's just science. I'm like, dude, you live in a world where like dragons exist. It's just stupid, and I hate that in that scenario in general. But Ollie would often come off like a huge jerk, and it never felt like he learned his lesson, and felt like, speaking of like generic lessons, it never felt like he was legit sorry or was progressing. It just kind of felt like, well, gee, I'm sorry, but I'm going to go back to being a jerk the very next episode. He just comes off like a jerk, and that was a little sidetrack. I was mentioning that because he was definitely in the right to get upset with Izzy because she endangered the team, but the way he did it, he just comes off so holier than thou, which makes him unlikable. Maybe that's just me, though. Anyway, the point is I just found it to be a little coincidental that, like, Izzy was having this machine storyline right when they needed her to know how to use machines, and that kind of came up a lot in these last section episodes. It's just these little coincidences. It's a nitpick, but it just kind of bothers me from a writing perspective because it just kept happening. And then you have the stuff with Pop about, you know, just be yourself if you're Pop. And that episode was okay. There was some funny stuff in it with Zato and Amelia switching places. Like, she tried to put up his antennas, and she was weirded out by patting herself on the back. And there was some good humor in that. The thing I did like about that episode is, even though it was kind of more of a fillery plot, you also had it leading into the next big plot, which was the Raptor Zords. And the Raptor Zords, I thought, was one of the strongest episodes of the season. Playing on Zato and Ion's connection, I loved that they delved into their past, and they have a little bit of traumatic stress from losing their old team. And it was a really great introduction for the Zords. A little bit crazy that they ended up drifting off into space. They explained that they, like, got hit and just drifted into space. I feel like because they have portal powers, it would have been easier to just say they accidentally opened a portal and went through it. But then they could say, why didn't they come back? Well, I don't know, but portals. Anyway, ever played Portal? It's a great game. That's my lesson for this. Anyway, I like that episode. I thought it was a really good introduction for the Zords. It really delved into the past. Seeing them fight their past team as Mirages was also really cool. And there was a really cool original fight. That's another sidetrack. There's lots of cool original fights. I think my favorite was still Green and Black's debut. That wasn't part of these episodes, but another favorite was during Ion's episode debut. He had that one where it was a little silly. He was surfing on like cardboard or something. But it was a really cool fight. Really cool stunts in them. And the finale, I thought, was very solid. Like, it was maybe a little anticlimactic, but I thought it was pretty good, for what it was. Part of me wishes they would have left their powers, off until next season. I thought that could have been interesting. But I think the fact that the Green Morphin Master brought their powers back raises questions as well, so it gives you something to talk about. And it definitely felt more like a season finale rather than some of them, like I think Dino Charge and Ninja Steel almost felt like a series finale, and then they had to figure out a reason why they're unpacking the suitcase during season 2. It felt much more like a season finale. But it was really good Void Knight stuff. I thought it was a unique finale too, and I liked that we got to see the Rangers fight like civilians. It was another cool fight. And I mentioned in my finale review that I love civilian fights when they have to have civilian fights. Because don't get me wrong, I enjoy a good civilian fight, but the more I've watched Power Rangers, the more it'll annoy me from a practical standpoint. Like, it makes no sense to fight this enemy without morphing. But I love the civilian fights when they have no choice and they have to just be courageous and fight without it. I still question how the powers work with the sword still existing if they were cut off from the grid. Although I guess it's not too dissimilar from the fact that Overdrive was cut off from the grid, but the Zord still existed, and like the Overdrive chest armor still existed. But I thought it made for a good finale. I like the way it left off, and I'm glad we didn't get rid of Void Knight. I think a lot of people were assuming, and even making me think, that we were going to not fully close the book on Void Knight, but close the book on him more firmly, and I think that it definitely leaves it open for him to be a bigger part of next season. And it wasn't the best finale, but I thought it was pretty good, and I thought the Morphin Master showing up at the end was an interesting note to leave off on. The Christmas special, I could, give it or take it. It's not that big of a deal. I thought it was enjoyable-ish. I'm not too huge of a fan of those episodes. It was fine. Pretty harmless. Just some other small little notes, which is something that I will talk about in my series review, I'm sure. But I thought there was lots of really funny moments in this season, in the second half, I mean. Like I talked about the Amelia body switch stuff, but there was lots of little actual funny moments, and I appreciate that things feel a little more natural. They use some more modern dialogue. I know that makes people cringe because they're like, oh, it's going to be dated. But like, I'll watch Ninja Storm or Dino Thunder, and they'll say stuff that's dated, but I know it's from that time. And to me, watching something like this in the future and knowing that the dialogue's dated now, but it wasn't back then, feels better than the show feeling like it's trying to be in the 90s. So I appreciate the more modern dialogue, and there's actually some really funny, good natural and humor and chemistry between the Rangers. Also, the score has absolutely been on point. I've really loved the score in this season, and there were several episodes, I think, the one with the Zords and the finale in particular, the score just really stood out. So I thought this was a very solid second half. I would say that it kept the momentum going from what I enjoyed from the first. I'll kind of talk about the season overall. I don't know when I do my series review, I don't know if I'm going to say one half was better than the other, but I'll say that I didn't feel a significant decline or anything like that. Like, I had a fairly positive opinion of it before it went on hiatus, and I didn't feel like it had a decline. I thought at the very least it stayed at the same quality, and I enjoyed myself. So I thought this was a very solid chunk of episodes. But what did you guys think of the rest of the episodes of the season? Let me know in the comments as always. As mentioned, in the coming weeks, I will be doing an overall season review to give my thoughts on, well, the season overall. Until next time, guys, thanks for watching, and don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and climb the steps and ring that bell so you get notifications for all my videos. Dawson Ryder, signing out.